A few months back I had all of these pallets hanging around since we had some roof tiles delivered, and most of them were softwood which I cut up and used as firewood, but one of the pallets was different from the others, so I pulled it out and decided I'd cut it up into usable pieces ready for a future project. A few weeks later, my friend Matt and I launched a woodworking challenge via our podcast, which is all about making a project using only one pallet, so this is going to be my entry. So I'm only allowed to use wood that came from that one pallet in this project. And I started running the pallet wood through my planer. I was still unsure what type of wood it was at this point because it was so dirty, and I know many people would hate running dirty wood through their planer, but I'm not worried about that because I have a really quick method for sharpening my planer knives. I'll leave a link to a video about that in the description box if you want to check it out. So I believe this wood is rubber wood, which is a medium density tropical hardwood. It's not anything special, but it beats spruce or pine in my opinion. So after running all this through the planer, we've got some really nice clean pieces like this piece here. We've got some woodworm damaged pieces like this piece here. That's unfortunate. And we've got some really badly stained pieces like this piece here. So I'm just going to spend some time sorting through this pile to figure out which pieces of wood are going to be usable and which are not, and then we can figure out what we can make. I've got 6 pieces here which are nice and clean, so I figured I could use 4 for the sides of a box and 2 for the lid, and later on I'll need to figure out what to do about making the bottom of the box. I want to keep the best pieces for the lid, so the other 4 will be my sides, and I'm going to let the wood dictate what size the box will end up being. So I'm just cutting away any imperfections and getting the edges square, and then cutting any bad bits away from the ends until I have 4 pieces that I'm happy with. So I decided I'd cut some dovetails, and this is only going to be my second ever attempt. The first attempt was 6 years ago, and back then I was working with some salvaged mahogany, and I did okay, but hopefully this time I can do better. A marking knife is best for this, but I couldn't find mine anywhere, so I'm just going to make do with a sharp pencil. And labelling everything is really important. I want to remember the order that each piece will go in, which way round it goes, and which way up. So lots of arrows and letters needed here. So the first corner came out not too bad. Once I get this glued and clamped, it should look okay. But the next one I managed to get a little tighter, perhaps a little too tight if anything. Next I'm going to swap my table saw blade over to my 6mm flat tooth grooving blade because I want to cut a housing groove in the sides that will later accommodate the bottom panel. For the two shorter sides of the box, I could simply make the rip cut from one end to the other, but for the longer sides I need to cut a stopped housing groove, otherwise the groove would be visible on the outside of the box. So with my blade set at the right height, I made marks on the table to represent where the arc of the blade starts and finishes. I could then lower the blade right down so that it was inside the table, counting the number of turns of the wheel, and then I powered on the saw, and with the workpiece held in position, I could raise the blade with the same number of turns, advance the cut to the finishing point, and then power off the saw. And here's what I'm left with. Then with the box assembled again, I can mark up the end point so that I can then extend that groove using a small chisel. For the bottom panel, I'm going to make use of some of these stained pieces. So I just need clean edges so that I can glue them up into a panel. And while I'm at it, I may as well glue up the clean pieces that I'm going to use to make the lid. I got the bottom panel cut to size and it needs to be about 12mm bigger than the actual internal dimensions of the box because it needs to fit inside that housing groove. And I'm going to need to cut a rebate around the edges of the bottom panel to fit inside that groove. I thought it would be sensible to do a dry assembly just to make sure that everything fits before I get glue on, and I added a bevel to the bottom of the back panel using my block plane. And then to hide all of those ugly stains, I'm going to use some India ink to stain the wood jet black. Before I glue the box together, I'm going to sand all of the inside faces while I still have easy access to them, and I can finally get everything glued together. And I won't really know whether I've done a decent job at these dovetails or not until the box is out of the clamps and everything gets cleaned up and sanded. This corner of the box was by far the best one, no filling needed here whatsoever. And this corner was my worst, so I'm going to rub some filler in here just to help hide the gaps. Now I can work on the lid. Somewhere up here I've got a jar full of old hinges, and some of these are solid brass, so I pulled out a couple of small ones. And to clean these up I'm going to use some green polishing compound on a buffing wheel in my drill. You can see here it's now quite shiny. It's not perfect, but these are second-hand hinges, so I'm happy with that. And I'm going to fit these 50mm in from the end, and I'm going to cut them in by hand using chisels. I'd originally cut my lid slightly oversized so that I could trim it down to the exact shape of the box. And rather than fit a handle to my lid, I thought I'd try something new by using a cove bit in the router table to cut a little finger recess. To fit the lid, I pack out the hinges using a couple of washers and add some super glue to the top so that I can get the lid in the perfect position. I sprayed on some activator to set the glue, and then I can open up the lid, drill pilot holes and add the screws. And now I can sand the edges of the box just to flush everything up. For finish, I decided to use a hard wax oil. This should help to bring out some contrast in the dovetails. And I've got some of these brass ball catchers, which I'll fit to keep the lid closed. These catchers have a tension adjustment in the side so that you can set it just how you want it. I denibbed with some 400 grit abrasive paper in between each coat, applied my maker's mark to the inside of the lid, and completed the finishing process, which took some time. So here is the finished box. This took 4 coats of hard wax oil. For some reason the wood was so thirsty it just kept drinking it up. So I did 3 brushed on and 1 final one wiped on with an abrasive pad, and now it looks great. One minor problem is that when I applied the finish, some staining came out in the end grain on the lid, which is a bit of a shame, but this is pallet wood, it was never going to be perfect. What's interesting about the dovetails is I looked back at the video of my first attempt of the dovetails, and to get all of the joinery cut and the box fitting together took me over 6 hours. This time I was done in under 3. So I've definitely got quicker and my skills have improved a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked over the course of 6 years of woodworking. But I think part of that is because I'm not a perfectionist. I admire perfectionists and I would love to be a perfectionist, but I'm just not one. I've kind of always been of the mindset of good enough is good enough, and I just don't think I have the level of patience required. But on the other hand, I think that makes me more prolific. It means that I can make more and more projects. Thanks for watching.